Chapter 3: A Tower to Heaven. There are currently about 6,000 spoken languages on Earth, but at the time of the Tower of Babel, there was only one language. In our coming chapter, we are going to learn about how God diversified the language of the descendants of Noah and his sons, causing them to scatter in groups according to languages across the face of the earth. This was the beginning of the races that we know today. This story is told in Genesis 11, 1 through 9. In our modern culture of hatefulness between races, it's important for us to remember that God's word says that there is only one true race, the human race. The idea of different races is actually completely false and deeply rooted in a false theory of evolution. Acts 17:26 clearly states that there is one true race. For one man he was created. From one man he created all the nations. Through the whole earth he decided beforehand that they should rise and fall, and he determined their boundaries. After God had washed the world clean of the evil that was in it, the earth was a very different place. The climate had changed, and there was connection between humans and animals. Many creatures that depended on vegetation to live and thrive died off for lack of food, or became smaller and weaker because of the change of their diet. Noah and his family did what God said to do, and they multiplied and spread over the earth. Their sons had children who had children, and soon there were many, many people on earth once again. A couple of 100 years had passed since the flood, and the earth was once again inhabited by evil people. Please take the time now to read the following scriptures. They give an account of the generations of Noah's family post-flood. Read Genesis 10, 1 through 32. This is the generations of Noah's family after the flood. As you can see, Noah's family spread far and wide. These people did not take advantage of the second chance God was giving the human race. God would have gladly taught them to live for him and how to build a culture based on godly concepts. But many of them were not interested. Instead, they turned their backs more and more on what was godly. As the post-flood population grew, they migrated southeast from the mountains of Ararat, where the ark had come to rest after the flood. As they moved in this southeasterly direction, they moved into the plain of Shinar, which we also know by the name of Sumer. It was in this land that Nimrod, a descendant of Noah's son Ham, became a mighty ruler. Nimrod was not a godly man, and he had power and ambition. It was under Nimrod's leadership that the city of Babel was built. The citizens of Babel wanted to build a tower to reach the sky. At this time in history, the towers were usually ziggurats, which were stair-step in design. We are not positive if the Tower of Babel was such a structure, but there is a good chance it was a ziggurat or something similar. Under Nimrod's leadership, the people thought they could elevate themselves to the level of God if they could build their tower tall enough. They were prideful and did not want to be scattered about over the face of the whole earth. This went against what God had commanded when he said to replenish the earth. God did not like disobedience then any more than he does now. He looked down on these people building their tower to reach the heavens and decided to mix them up. During this time, all people spoke the same language and could communicate with each other without any difficulty. But God decided to diversify the language situation. Can you see it? Workers were busy on the tower construction, congratulating themselves on how smart they were, when suddenly the bricklayer could not understand the mortar layer, the overseer could not understand the messenger boy, and the architect could not give directions that anyone could understand. They looked at each other in complete confusion. As time passed and the language issue remained, Nimrod's rule crumbled. Every day, life became too much of a struggle to hold the civilization together. The Bible is not clear on how God confused the languages. We don't know if each family spoke a different dialect or if it was literally that each individual person had their own language now. At any rate, the language barrier caused much of the population to leave the plain of Shinar. To this day, the word Babel means confusion. God had successfully ended construction of the blasphemous tower. He watched as the people split up into groups in which they understood each other. These groups moved away in different directions and settled in other places. These would be the start of the first civilizations in other parts of the world. People groups migrated to Asia, which would become ancient China, to the Indus River Valley, which would someday become India, to Africa, where a powerful civilization would grow along the Nile River, and even the Americas. These civilizations would become powerful nations. Let's take a look at two of these civilizations. The first one is actually a group of city-states that had residents in the Fertile Crescent, or Mesopotamia. This is the same location of the Tower of Babel. It is between the Tigris and Euphrates River on the southern end, near the delta that empties into the Persian Gulf. The Sumerians, as these people came to be called, were most likely the people who remained after the great dispersion of people groups following the Tower of Babel. These people quickly became known for their impressive culture. Their land was fertile because of its location between the two mighty rivers. It was further improved by canals, dams, and irrigation systems which channeled water from the rivers into their fields. These people were intelligent and inventive. In fact, we can thank them for the invention of the wheel. They also were the first civilization to use time based on increments of 60, which we use for our seconds and minutes. They were the first civilization after the flood that had a written language. They were also diligent in their study of the skies. By studying the moon, they charted months and years and set up a surprisingly accurate calendar. Their writing tool, which is called a stylus, made wedge-shaped markings in clay tablets. This type of writing is called cuneiform. There are many written records from the Sumerian civilization. By recording these clay tablets, historians have discovered many fascinating pieces of information about the Sumerians' way of life and their belief system. The Sumerians were polytheists, people who worshiped many gods. They worshiped the forces of nature that helped or hindered their farming, and they gave power to the sun, moon, and stars. For their intelligence and inventiveness, the Sumerians could not have been further from the truth where their gods were concerned. The second large ancient civilization we will look at is ancient Egypt. After the Tower of Babel, a group of people, thought to be led by Mizraim, Noah's grandson, through his son Ham, went southeast to the northeastern corner of Africa. Here, along the Nile River, they built a massive civilization on the mighty river because it provided water for the land around it. We are all probably somewhat familiar with the ancient Egyptians, with their mummies and pyramids, which we'll learn about in our next chapter. But did you know that these people were also accomplished farmers? Ancient Egyptian farmers were advanced in matters of engineering. They successfully designed and constructed massive irrigation systems to use the water from the Nile River for their crops. The Nile is the longest river in the world and is one of the few rivers in the world that runs from south to north. At its north end, where the water rushes to meet the Mediterranean Sea, the river forms a delta. This delta is one of the most fertile areas on Earth. The mighty river began to rise to flood levels in June and stayed high through the month of September. Within 2 to 3 months, the water went back to where it was supposed to be. While the water was high, it was channeled through the irrigation ditches to water the fields. The Nile was also used as a superhighway to carry goods up to the delta area.